Hey yo, what is up? 1.18.1 is here, and in today's video, I put the thumbnail out. I'm gonna cover these three tanks: the K-2, the Udarniy, and the WZ-113 version 2. Why these two tanks? These three tanks. I've already made individual videos about them, but today exclusively, these three tanks are in focus because these three tanks have been or are being extensively tested on the 118.1 live server. I'm not talking about common test server here. I'm not talking about super test server here. I'm talking about live servers. These three tanks have already entered the live server testing, including the WZ-113 version 2. So let's quickly go over these three tanks, and I'll get you up to speed on the three. This is of course the K-2. This is basically an IS-3 that looks a little bit different. It's got almost the same turret as an IS-3, but it is a worse version of an IS-3. It's got pretty poor penetration. Standard pen is only 203 millimeters of penetration. Well, it's 203 millimeters isn't too bad. You won't die. I mean, it's not the end of the world. But compared to what all the other tanks are in 2022, 203 penetration just isn't going to cut it. The premium penetration is not bad. It is 270 with heat shells, and stock shells, AP, premium shells, heat. The thing that's really terrible about this tank is the shell velocity. 790 meters per second on the standard AP shells. 790 meters per second, it's like almost like artillery shell speed. It's really slow. You have to lob your shells over the horizon to hit your target basically. And the reload speed, 14.38 seconds. It's just, I don't know, man. In today's world, 14.38 seconds, it is basically the same reload speed as a Defender. Now, today, we're going to talk a lot about the IS-3 and the Defender. The Defender, when it first came out, big hoo-ha. But yeah, 14.38 seconds of a reload. Remember, Defender does 440 alpha. This K2 only 390 alpha. So for 50 less alpha and the same reload speed, not that great. The dispersion as well, 0.42 dispersion on this tank makes it the same kind of poor accuracy as a 252 Defender. The moving dispersions as well is pretty bad. 0.27 dispersion. That is a worse moving dispersion than the Defender. Also, it has very low horsepower, 715 horsepower with 30 kilometers an hour forward speed and 12 in reverse. This thing has a power to weight ratio of 13:1:3. That makes it in that super heavy category. The armor is not too bad, 160 hull armor. I mean, if you have like 225 penetration, lower plate is still not easy to pen. You only get about 25%, 30% chance of penning with 225 millimeters of penetration on the lower plate. The upper plate, a little bit better chance, 41%. On the sides, of course, you're not going to pen it. The turret is almost impenetrable with 250 turret armor. Basically, the hull armor is better than the Object 252U. The turret armor is the same as an Object 252U. Of course, there is a weak spot in the top of the turret, just like the IS-3. If you hit this part here, you're going to pen. But this tank, man, in my opinion, the K2, you should completely ignore it. If you need to grind for this tank, if you need to earn tokens to get this tank, if you need to spend time on this tank, if they don't outright give this tank to you for free, I'm gonna say forget about this tank, ignore this tank, stay as far the hell away from this tank, especially if you have a choice of other tanks to choose from. Example, if these 3 tanks came out together at the same time, the K-2 is the one that you are going to completely forget about. Your only 2 choices you would have is Udarniy and the WZ-113. I mean, if you are any of my long-time viewers and you get the K-2, man, please don't come back to my channel, okay? This tank is just not worth it. Don't do it, please. Okay, let's move on to the next tank, which is the Udarniy. And the Udarniy, we're gonna talk a lot about the, comparisons with the 252U with this tank again. The Udarniy, of course, there is another version called the 259A, which is a quicker, faster firing version. Now, in my opinion, the 259A is my choice because it has maybe less armor, but it's going to have more, even better mobility and gun handling than this one. It has less hit points than this one. My choice would be the 259A, but right now it is the Udarniy that is being tested. In fact, it was being tested a couple of months ago. I made a video about this being on the live server. This tank is all about armor. The armor is better than a Defender. It has 100 more hit points than a Defender. 1600 hit points. The Defender has only 1500 hit points. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the time the Defender came out. It was a huge debacle. It was mass hysteria. People were pulling their hair. It was insane. People thought it was like, oh my god, this is the end of the line for World of Tanks. They are going downhill from now onwards with the release of the Defender. But fast forward 4 years on, the Defender is still around. In fact, the Defender is no longer the top dog. It is no longer the OP tank. So I don't see why the Udarniy would be any different. The APCR stock standard shells is 221 penetration. And the premium shells are going to be heat shells with 285 penetration. Now, the standard APCR shells, it's a lot better than the Defender, which has AP shells, but the Defender has 225 penetration as stock shells. The Udarniy 221 is still not bad. It's still very good standard shells with APCR. Remember, APCR has higher velocity, which means more accuracy from a distance. The heat penetration 285 with heat shells. The shell velocity 1100 on the APCR, 820 on the heat, which is very normal. This means the shell and shell velocity, the ammo type, the Udarniy is going to be better than the Defender. However, this is a 390 alpha gun. The Defender, remember, has a 440 alpha gun, so 50 more damage in the Defender, 50 less damage in the Udarniy. However, this thing reloads in 11.51 seconds, which means you can get this down to about maybe 10 seconds reload time, while the Defender reloads in 14.38 seconds, which means about 13 seconds reload if you have food and vII and whatnot. Aim time is about the same, 2.97 seconds. The Defender is about 3.05 seconds or something like that. Dispersion, however, accuracy much better than Defender, 0.40, while the Defender has 0.42 dispersion. The moving dispersion is the same as the Defender, 0.24. Nothing to shout about, but not too shabby, to be honest with you. The speed, however, the Udarniy has 45 kilometers an hour speed going forward, while the Defender only has 35 kilometers an hour going forward. The horsepower as well, 900 horsepower versus 850 in the Defender. However, the weight is 65 tons on the Udarniy, really heavy tank. The Defender is only 51 tons. So, 14 ton difference there. So, even though it's got 45 kilometers an hour top speed, 10 kilometers an hour faster than the Defender, it's still going to be a much heavier tank. So I assume it's going to be around the same kind of speed, sluggishness, or maybe even a tad slower than the Defender. The power to weight ratio 13.85, the Defender is 16.50, so that gives you an indication that the Udarniy is going to be a much heavier, slower tank. It's going to play more like a super heavy than a compared to a Defender. Defender is going to have a little bit more agility. However, if you even like the Defender a little bit, you are going to absolutely love the Udarniy compared to the Defender. This thing, in my opinion, is going to kick the Defender's ass, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to feel the same way as well, because just look at this thing. It looks like a beast, man. Look at that hull. It's got a V shape, and then it is recessed in the lower plate. I mean, damn, this thing is a beast. However, if it's side scraping, imagine you can pan that because it's not flat here. You are able to pan all this part of the pike nose, just underneath the pike nose. I think this is going to be much easier to pan. But yeah, let's see what happens. Of course, the weak points are not the front plate. You have to shoot here the upper plate here in order to pan. The weak points are going to be that commander's cupola there. Penetration easily 116 millimeters only, but you need to hit it square. So that is the Udarniy for you. Let's move on to our last tank, which is going to be the 113 version 2. This is the Chinese Defender. This tank was on the Chinese server much earlier, around I would say nearly a year ago, before it reached us. And this tank was actually part of World of Tanks Plus program. Now this was a subscription based like a premium account on top of a premium account, where you would get the WZ-113 as a rental over that period of time. However, they ran this program for 5-6 months, and they've put it on the back burner for the last 7 months. You can see March was the last time this event stopped. World of Tanks Plus in China stopped in March of 2022, and they put a note here saying your account will not be renewed. Your World of Tanks Plus account will not be renewed after March of 13th, and that is how it ended up being in limbo. And I suppose now they want to figure out a way to stick it into EU and NA and Asia so that the rest of us can enjoy this tank. This is the one that I am most interested in, because the WZ-113 version 2 looks a lot like the 113 in tier 10. This tank, why I like this tank so much is because this tank is going to be a heavy tank cosplaying as a medium tank. Yep, this tank is very interesting. The penetration on this thing, not very high, only 215 of stock penetration, which is AP shells, and the premium shells are going to be APCR shells with 265 penetration, which isn't too bad. I mean, considering this, like I said, this is going to be a heavy tank masquerading as a medium tank, which means it's going to have some kind of high mobility, but the damage or the alpha on this gun is only going to be 320. Compare that to the Object 250U Defender 440. It's got 120 more damage than this tank, but the difference here is this tank reloads in 9.59 seconds, which means it's going to reload in 8 seconds with food and BIA. For 320 alpha, you're talking about something like a CS52 LIS kind of reload and damage. So that is why this tank is pretty interesting. The aim time as well, only 2.3 seconds. Object 252U reloads in 3.07 seconds. Udarniy also 3 seconds. This thing aims in 2.3 seconds. Dispersion as well, 0.35, makes this tank really competitive. 0.35 is very accurate for a heavy tank. And the moving dispersion, 0.18. Remember, Udarniy and Object 252U has 0.24 dispersion. This thing is 0.18 dispersion. It's going to make a lot of difference in terms of accuracy on the move as well. So this thing is going to masquerade, it's going to cosplay as a medium tank, but it's going to have heavy tank armor. Top speed on this tank, 50 kilometers an hour. That's pretty quick. 15 kilometers an hour in reverse. The power to weight ratio is 16.35 on a 40-ton tank. Remember this. The Object 252U is 51 tons. The Udarniy is 65 tons. This thing is 40 tons. However, the engine power only 660. So maybe, maybe they lower the horsepower there, but they increase the power to weight ratio. It's going to make this tank not too powerful, not too fast, going to that, getting to that 50 kilometers an hour top speed. But the agility is going to be just like, well, not exactly like a T44, maybe more like a CS52 kind of agility. CS52 is still pretty agile because it is a medium tank, but this is going to be a heavy tank pretending to be a medium tank. So 16.35 power to weight ratio is pretty good, and out of all these three tanks, this is the one that I'm going to be interested in. The armor profile as well, 120 frontal hull armor, which means 225 penetration, easily going to chew through that lower plate, no problem. The upper plate, more difficult, less probability of panning. The turret is 240 millimeters of penetration. The Defender has 250 millimeters of frontal turret armor. The Udarniy 300 millimeters. You can't even compare that. Different game, different ballpark. The weakness, of course, on this turret is going to be the cupola, the commander's hatch. This tank has two cupolas here. The right cupola here, not easy to hit because it's smaller, and you can penetrate it if you hit it smack center, but not easy to hit. This one is not easy to hit, even though from here it looks like it's easy to hit, but you can see it is actually further backwards and slightly lower. It's not going to be easy to hit. The one you want to go for is this one with the machine gun port. That's the one that's going to yield the better result. Again, the armor, 120 hull armor. The Udarniy is 150 hull armor. The 252 Object Defender is 130 hull armor. So 120 isn't that bad. And the turret armor, 240. The Object 252U is 250. The Udarniy is 300 on the turret. Sorry, not the hull. The hull is 120. So that is the news that I have for you so far. K-2, Udarniy, WZ-113 version 2. These three tanks being extensively tested on the live server right now. It is already in the game. Players are already testing these three tanks out. How would they appear in the game? I don't know. Maybe Christmas boxes, maybe some event, maybe you're going to do a marathon again. I don't know. But again, ignore the K2. K2 is not worth your time. Go for the Udarniy or the WZ-113 version 2. Out of these three, I'm going to pick the 113 version 2. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.